Novo and Hims ended up entering into a partnership. And within that partnership, Novo agreed to drop the lawsuit, and now they're moving forward doing business together. So if you were using Hims as compounded version, you can now transition.
If you're looking for these medications for cheap, you're looking for easy access to them, this sounds amazing. From a physician standpoint, I get worried about what is being evaluated and if it's being evaluated in full or appropriately. The patient doesn't always know what's important or what's not important. And the physician is not allowed to ask additional questions, following up on thyroid cancer, following up on certain side effects. Like, those are things that I'm seeing in that process that is missing. Medicine,
Law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area. Welcome back, everyone. This is the Medico-Legal Brief here with Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. We've got a fun conversation today, something that is current and relevant. I'm excited to jump right into it, but just make sure you hit the like and subscribe button below and follow us along our journey here. So, Nik, today's conversation is all about GLP-1s again, but more specifically, this lawsuit that has been going on over the last 1 or 2 years, and it just came to an ending recently. And I'm curious to see what came of it. What came of that lawsuit between a big company that makes the GLP-1s and a compound pharmacy?
There's a lawsuit between Novo Nordisk and Hims and Hers, and essentially it follows the GLP-1 craze. Brings back some topics that we've had in previous discussions as far as patent infringement, compounding drugs, obviously the GLP-1 craze. And it's been very interesting. And it's unique because when you're looking at lawsuits and you're looking at litigation, these things can go on for a long, long time. From the beginning of the lawsuit to the end of the lawsuit, there's a lot of stuff that may happen. But there is a unique result that just recently happened that has ended up stopping the lawsuit. I'm excited to look into that. I'm excited to talk to you about it. I want to ask you a few questions because I feel like this might be one of the main points of interest, which is in the debate that was centered around the lawsuit. Explain telehealth, because from my understanding, Hims and Hers is a company that focuses primarily on the telehealth process and that telehealth blueprint. So for our listeners, what is telehealth? How do we utilize it? And what is the interaction as far as physicians and medical staff and doctors go?
Telehealth is basically telecommunication between patient and a physician or provider to get their needs met, whether that's healthcare maintenance, whether that's medications, screening. It's basically something that is supposed to help a certain empty hole in the healthcare system. This started several years ago. I would say maybe even up to a decade ago. It started catching traction, but it really got propelled into the limelight when COVID hit, because then we were all stuck at home. And so it just opened the doors for more telehealth, more companies to allow phone conversations, video conversations as being qualified and allowed to be billed as an actual medical visit. And then we started to see Medicare, Medicaid also reimburse for those options as well, especially for the high needs patients who are not able to get into the office physically in rural areas where it takes a lot longer or further away to get to a medical facility. Then these are good options to help bridge that care and allow physicians and other providers to actually connect with their patients in a meaningful way. However, more recently, the legislation has been pause and go at moments, and reimbursements have been cut and then restarted and cut again. And so it's really up in the air in the moment whether or not it's going to be something that we continue to pursue in the future in the health field.
So from the difference between going into your normal clinic and seeing your family doctor and then telehealth, is the insurance aspect as prevalent in telehealth as it is in the traditional finding a doctor, going in, seeing your doctor, so on and so forth?
Are you asking if the payout is the same?
I guess my question for you is, if I have insurance, would insurance allow me to take the telehealth route, or are there restrictions on it just by the very nature of what it is?
Yes, most insurances will allow some sort of telehealth component, but they will limit it to a certain kind or certain style or how much you're able to do, and they will only cover a portion of that pay. You might have a copay if you wanted to do it. The other restriction is whether or not your physician or provider is comfortable doing televisit. Some people who are not technologically up to date may not feel as comfortable doing a video visit or a phone visit and addressing your complaints without doing a physical exam. There are restrictions medically too. There are things that shouldn't be done over the phone or over a video visit. If we were coming in for appendicitis, I would not want to diagnose you, treat you over video. I would want to actually feel your stomach, get labs, do all these other things in person before doing a telehealth visit.
Okay. Okay. It sounds like from that nature of telehealth, there's a lot of things that are intertwined with your family physician and what you're actually using as far as a telehealth system that is available to you.
Correct. And telehealth is not just limited to family physicians. This actually spans across specialties as well. There are some specialties that will follow up post op, maybe 2, 4 weeks after the surgery, via phone or via video. Just check in, especially if the patient is lower risk and there's no major need for them to come in physically.
Okay. So now I'm going to lay out, I researched what hims and hers and their process is. I'm going to go through the typical user flow that a patient would experience. And I want you to give some input on it. And again, this will tie back into the lawsuit, but it shows that a typical user, a typical patient will download hims and hers, I guess, download the app. And if you're looking at specifically like the GLP-1s, you're going to select weight loss as what you're trying to achieve. They'll give you a questionnaire. You'll fill out that questionnaire. And then a doctor who I guess is employed by hims and hers will then review that questionnaire, whether it's the same day, it's the next day, and they will essentially approve a prescription for you. And if that prescription is approved, then obviously you go the route of getting your medication, and the medication will be shipped to your house within 1 to 5 days. How do you feel about that process? Because it seems like you're filling something out and somebody on the other end is reviewing a form and saying, all right, approved. All right, approved. All right, approved. So what's your opinion on that process?
From a patient standpoint, if you're looking for these medications for cheap, you're looking for easy access to them, this sounds amazing to them. It sounds like a quick and easy way for you to get the medication that you're looking for. From a physician standpoint, I get worried about what is being evaluated and if it's being evaluated in full or appropriately. The person reviewing the paperwork will only get the data that the patient puts down. But the patient doesn't always know what's important or what's not important. And the physician is not allowed to ask additional questions, right? Especially on that questionnaire. They're just filling out once, you get the questionnaire, and then that's it. Following up on thyroid cancer, following up on certain side effects, like those are things that I'm seeing in that process that is missing. The patient may really want a weight loss medication. They know they have a thyroid cancer history or a family member with thyroid cancer, but they don't want to disclose that because they don't want to be disqualified. This process allows those sort of patients who are really, really desperate for weight loss to get the medication, even though there are risk factors or contraindications for them. And so that is the one thing that I would worry about working for this sort of company and allowing this sort of company continue to exist.
My lawyer brain, all the red flags and alarms go off because I think that there's liability there. Granted, I'm sure they've written out protections and you have to fill out forms and agreements, but if you really wanted something and it's not true follow-up and you're not having an actual face-to-face or even Zoom style interaction, you can put whatever you want to get whatever you want. I'd be worried about patients, to your point, not including everything that they need to include. Patients leaving out important pieces of information that may disqualify them from having certain prescriptions, but because they really want that, they're going to figure out the best way to answer that questionnaire to get the prescription. That just screams liability to me because you're putting a lot of onus on the patient to understand and be honest with what they're telling you.
The liability absolutely is there. A lawyer would know more whether or not they are liable, especially with whatever they have contractually signed when they get these medications. But that is one of the biggest things that we worry about when we prescribe medications in person, is making sure that we ask all the appropriate questions that will help mitigate any sort of side effects or risk factors down the line. Because every medication has a side effect. It's whether or not that side effect will cause irreparable harm to the patient that then we start to worry.
The other thing that we talked about in one of our previous episodes was how to select a good doctor. And it seems like this is pulling the selection process completely out of the equation. You're just getting assigned to whatever doctor's there to review your questionnaire. And you don't know if that doctor is good, bad, knowledgeable, not knowledgeable. You just know there is a licensed doctor on the other end that is making some decision based on my health. And I feel like that health could go way past weight loss medication. There are other items of importance that could really, really do some harm if it's not taken seriously and not reviewed in a professional light, so to speak.
Correct. And you're actually assuming that there's a physician behind that script. We have an episode where we talk about the different providers that are out there, physician assistants, nurse practitioners. So they are also potentially there prescribing and reviewing, but may miss certain things. And so, yes, it's really important that you want to create that relationship. But again, the patients that are really desperate looking for these medications, you are going to try to bypass those scenarios so that you can get the medication that you're looking for. Ultimately, it's really important that you do your due diligence and that there have been cases out there, not necessarily for these GLP-1s, but there are psychiatric telehealth companies who prescribe psychiatric medications. And there have been poor outcomes, such as suicide. In the future, maybe we should look up some of those cases and run through who was charged, who was liable, because they are getting these medications for their mental health on a telehealth site, and they're supposed to have regular follow-up, but no one's truly following up. And then documentation shows that, hey, the patient never said that they were struggling, or they never put down that they were having issues, or maybe nothing was escalated in the appropriate manner. Those are the layers of protections that get missed when you go through this telehealth company or site.
And then you throw in the notion of a lot of these companies are global, worldwide. If the standards are different in the other countries, if the licensing is different in the other countries, if the prescription setup is different, there's so many different ways to look at it where you really have to do your research to know that you're getting something that is legitimate and you're going through an appropriate process.
So tell me, when did this lawsuit get filed? Like, when did it start? Because I could have sworn it was a couple years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, right?
So long, looks like we had to do a quick switch, a quick background switch for you.
Yeah, my son woke up from his nap, so we had to move. That way there wasn't too much distraction in the background for me.
The joys of parenthood, right? Okay, so to go back to your question, setting the lay of the land, what I'm seeing is about 2025. If we step back into the history of what happened, and I appreciate the breakdown of telehealth because that's one of the most important aspects of this. Novo, very, very popular with the GLP-1 drugs. You got the Wegovy, you got the Ozempic, and we talked about in our GLP-1 episode the fact that there was a push with GLP-1s a few years ago, and it basically stressed out the market. Then that allowed these compounding pharmacies to come in and start making their cocktails of GLP-1s. Can you remind our listeners what the compounding pharmacies do in the sense of creating pharmaceuticals and drugs?
Compounding pharmacies are pharmacies that custom make certain medications and certain formulations. Maybe a medication that is coming from the manufacturer, the original brand name medication, comes in a capsule, and you're wanting to make it into a tablet instead. These compound pharmacies would be able to do that, or vice versa, go from a tablet to a capsule, or maybe it's only a tablet and they want to make it into a liquid form for their kids. These are the compounding pharmacies and their ability to make those things. However, that also means that they take these recipes, these original recipes from the manufacturers, and they have to adjust the recipes so that it can be formulated in the version that the patients are looking for. And so what these compound pharmacies have done over the last couple of years is exactly that, is take these GLP-1s and then reformulate it in a specific way so that they can sell it on their own at a cheaper price using different ingredients. And those are the ingredients that some are apparent and put out there so that we can all see, but there are some that are unknown. And so we don't have the data or backing to support any sort of research done, and no one's holding these compound pharmacies to do any sort of research and put out any data for long-term effects on these new recipes. Whereas the manufacturers like Novo Nordisk, Lilly, they have to put out the data to the FDA to get approval to put it onto market.
And that's how we get to where we're at now. Hims and Hers runs a telehealth platform, and they're prescribing these medications online. With the demand for GLP-1s, obviously, they have identified an area of the market that they can profit off of. Everybody wants GLP-1s. Even in the couple months that we've talked about it, we've gone from shots to pills to different brands coming out. It's all a craze. Hims began selling compounded versions of, and I want you to explain this, semaglutide, which is, from my understanding, the active ingredient that's in the Wegovy and in the Ozempic. Are you familiar with the semaglutide and what it does?
Yeah, so I don't want to go back through the entire science behind it. If you want to go back and reference our GLP-1 episode, I'll put it up here for us. But semaglutide is is the active ingredient in the brand names that we've heard of, which is the Ozempic injection, the Wegovy injection, as well as the Wegovy oral pill, and for those who don't know, the Rybelsus oral pill too. There are four different medications made by the original Novo Nordisk manufacturer that has these active ingredient semaglutide, which is a GLP-1 hormone.
Okay. And so from there, him made the compounded version of that. Hims ended up selling this product. These versions were obviously cheaper. They were cutting the market from under Novo. And the other important thing is they weren't FDA approved. We've talked about before with some of the compounding medications because of the need and the stress. FDA is overlooking those things that are important that wouldn't be front and center for any sort of pharmaceutical trial. At this point, Novo's making their money. They see that Hims has cornered a specific part of the market. Everybody wants drugs that are cheaper, faster, quicker. And Novo gets wind of this and essentially accuses Hims of basically selling a copycat drug, accuses them of patent infringement. When you're looking at patents and patent law, it's a very specific type of law in which it's part of intellectual property, but there's a lot behind it. To the point of being a patent lawyer, you actually have to go take the bar exam and then go take an additional exam that is almost like the bar for patent law. And there's a requirement that you have some sort of engineering background, because part of putting that patent forth, you have to make sure that you're formulaic, that you're putting in measurements, that you're putting in very, very, very scientific or engineer based descriptions, because you're creating something, right? A patent could be as simple as a computer mouse. It could be as elaborate as a pharmaceutical drug. Patents are very important. And by establishing your patents, you're protecting your ideas, you're protecting your intellectual property, so on and so forth.
Uh, I actually might have a stupid question for you. Do patents expire? Is this a patent that you're obtaining once in your lifetime and you're good, you keep it forever until you sell it or pass it on to the next person? How does that work and once you receive the patent?
Yes, patents do expire. There are a few different years and timelines. So, a utility patent for functional inventions are 20 years from filing. And then for design patents, 15 years from the grant date. And then you have to pay maintenance fees on these patents. If the maintenance fees aren't paid for, then those patents could end up essentially expiring. But after the 20 years or 15 years for these patents, the invention enters the public domain. And when something enters the public domain, it allows anyone to make it, to use it, or sell it without the permission of the original patent holder.
So is there a like database of patents out there? Because I can only imagine there are millions and billions of patents.
Yep. Yep. You can go search for these patents. Within finding these patents, you can see all the specs. You can see how things are made. I'm sure that there are some instances of intellectual property that may remain confidential or in certain circumstances may not be included, but you can actually go see how some of these things are made. You can see schematics, you can see formulas. And that's the unique thing is it's really easy to copycat things when they're out there. But if you're trying to copycat and then make a buck off of it, that's where the problem lies. So Novo and Hims are now in this lawsuit. Novo files against Hims for patent infringement. You're stealing our pharmaceuticals, you're stealing our compound. And then they wage a marketing war. You get out there and you start telling everybody why they should not be buying from Hims and Hers. It's not FDA approved. It's not the quote unquote real versions. Now there's this battle in the pharmaceutical market with these GLP-1s, and it's at the forefront because like we've talked about, GLP-1s are at the forefront. Then we get to what is the most unique part of this is what happened very recently in 2026 as to how they handled this disagreement. What do you think? What do you think happened in this disagreement to come to terms with what's going on between these two companies?
Honestly, that absolutely have no idea how this ended. All I know is that it was going on and then all of a sudden it disappeared. And there was not any sort of settlement that I could see. There wasn't any sort of winner that I could see or heard of. Because usually when there are these big situations or suits within the medical field, it gets spread around fairly quickly. And we all, as doctors, try to keep up with it as much as possible because it does affect the way we prescribe and how we prescribe, as well as what we can educate and tell the patients. I'm curious to see what the final outcome was, but I'm pretty sure that there was not like a true settlement, like no one paid out another person.
You are correct. And I like the fact that you use the term there wasn't a winner there because they were both winners. What ended up happening is that Novo and Hims ended up entering into a partnership. And within that partnership, Novo agreed to drop the lawsuit, and now they're moving forward doing business together.
Do you know the details? So are they going to allow him to use the original recipe from the actual manufacturer, and then Novo Nordisk is just going to be the supplier?
That is correct. Hims will now sell Novo's official medications through its telehealth platform, and these include the Wegovy and the Ozempic. And then in turn, Novo agreed to drop the lawsuit. And then other key terms of the deal, Hims has stopped advertising the compounded GLP-1 drugs except in very rare medical cases. And then patients using the compounded versions can transition to the FDA-approved Novo drugs. So if you were using Hims' compounded version, you can now transition and get the real stuff from Novo that is FDA approved. And then Novo supplies its medications to Hims at self-pay prices for telehealth patients. It's a win-win for both companies.
I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around it. The reason the compound pharmacies are exist is because they make money off of making a knockoff, essentially.
Mhm.
Now that they're getting the original version, how are they going to make their profits? They can't keep selling the original medication with the compounded price. I can't imagine that that's going to be happening.
You're spot on. The price will end up increasing. But if you're Hims and you're facing a lawsuit for patent infringement, you might be looking at the long-term picture where if we end up losing this lawsuit, not only are we going to have to stop supplying this medication, it's going to hurt our reputation, but we're also probably going to have to pay a lot of money to Novo. And then from there, other lawsuits can rain in from your patients that are unhappy with how things went. Maybe Hims looked at Novo and said, all right, we're afraid to play this game. We understand that we're probably going to have a losing case. Let's just partner instead. Because Hims and Hers is becoming more of a name brand throughout the country. So with the ability to partner, Hims wins out because they then get the backing and a partnership with Novo, and then Novo wins out because they don't have to do a lengthy lawsuit and they don't have to worry about this compounding rip-off drug that's on the streets that's undercutting them at every step. It's good for patients in a way, and I want your opinion on this. It gives legitimate access to a legitimate drug. It reduces the regulatory risk because these are FDA approved. It pulls them away from the compounded cheap alternatives. Now, the market also had a good reaction. Hims stock surged after the announcement because legal risk disappeared and now their access to GLP-1s expanded. And it also shows this major shift in telehealth pharma relationships because by Novo backing and partnering with Hims, it adds that much more reputation. But I wanted to get your opinion on all those things and how you feel in general about a partnership like that.
I would want to know what distinguishes Hims from just going to your family doc, because your family doc should feel comfortable prescribing these medications. And if you're going to be paying the same price as you would anyways, well, why not? Except when you go to your actual family doc, they know you better. They know your other past medical histories, and they're able to see you in person to monitor for any major side effects. Some patients may not realize that maybe they're losing weight in the wrong way or maybe losing too much weight too quickly. Those are things that we look out for when I see my patients on GLP-1s. I want to make sure that we are maintaining a good amount of protein intake. We're making sure that we're exercising and doing strength training to maintain muscle mass. You lose a lot of that personal care when you go through a telehealth because the check-ins are much more quick. The check-ins are much more regimented and very much simplified to just catch the big red flags. Are you having severe constipation, or are you having any abdominal pain for pancreatitis or gallstone, or things like that? It will miss out on a whole chunk of risk factors. Telehealth and weight loss and these things there is a place for it for sure. If it helps make things more affordable, I would love that for my patients, but I also want to make sure we do everything in the right way so that we don't cause further harm or other issues that will put a strain on the health system in a different way. Just because we're helping people lose weight now, but then end up with cancer later down the line. Like that's not what the ultimate goal is, right?
You're talking about pricing. I ended up looking up the pricing and the differences. Prior to this, patients were paying $50 to $200 a month for the cheap compounded GLP-1s. Now they're going to be paying $350 to $500 a month. I wonder if the Hims patients, to your point, will end up start seeking out other areas when you're paying the same price. Maybe it is better just to go to your family physician. Maybe that's the better move where within that price, you're still getting the personalization, you're getting the conversation, you're getting the checking and adjusting as opposed to, okay, well, it's no longer that cheap, so I'm not going to go through Hims. I wonder if this will truly impact Hims is patient retainment.
A couple of points there is that Hims and Hers are companies that actually sell other things too. They don't just do GLP-1s and weight loss. They do hair loss. They do hormone replacement. They do all variety of medications. It's not just weight loss. We're focusing in on that because of the Novo Nordisk component of it. There are other types of telehealth and compound pharmacies out there that also do the same thing. And I wonder if they're going to find the same sort of lawsuits against them. And I can't imagine that Novo Nordisk is going to want to partner with all of these different companies, especially the smaller ones. I'm curious to see where that legally will lead moving forward. That might be why Hims has taken this direction, being the first and probably only company that will be partnering essentially for this sort of medication prescription.
A partnership like this can definitely be precedent setting. When you're looking at all the other pharmaceutical companies, when you're looking at Novo Nordisk and other companies saying, hey, well, if we do the same thing that Hims and Hers did, then maybe we can get that backdoor partnership with insert pharmaceutical company here. And I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. People in this day and age want cheap and convenient, and that's what it seems like Hims and Hers is providing, cheap and convenient. But if you start putting up walls or even entering into partnerships like this, aspect of being cheap and being convenient slowly starts disappearing. And I guess to your point, and I didn't really think about this, but when you're looking at an agreement like this, if Hims and Hers is pulling in money, enough money from other parts of their company to offset the costs of the GLP-1s, it still might be a good deal because they might bring in other people based on the weight loss. And by getting your foot in the door on weight loss, now you're going into hair loss or you're going to hormone therapy or going into anything else that Hims and Hers may offer as a brand and as a package.
Good point. Good point. For our viewers, I'd like to hear what everyone thinks and whether or not this is something they would do in terms of going online and getting these medications through a telehealth company, and whether or not you'd feel comfortable not getting that close of a follow-up. I'm curious how much of our audience would be willing to do that. And if you guys want to post down below, I'd like to do a little tally and just see what that looks like. Is it 50%? Is it 90% of patients are a little bit more risk adverse? I'm kind of curious.
That's a good question for our audience because I feel like at least the generation below us is really comfortable shopping sight unseen. That's where the Carvana comes into play, where you just get on your phone and get on your app and buy a car, never having driven it, never having seen it. You don't know, you just see some photos and you're like, oh yeah, I like that car. I'll spend a couple grand on getting that. These things, it's recurring. It's the speed and convenience of it. It might be generational. I for one, appreciate the convenience that Hims and Hers provide, but I still feel more comfortable going to a doctor and saying, hey, like, what do I need? What can you do for me? How can you help me? Should I be doing this? So maybe I'm just old fashioned. Maybe
I was just going to say, I think we're getting really old because I feel the same way. I don't think I would take any sort of medication that is not being prescribed directly from my primary or my surgical team or my medical team, because I would want to be able to ask those questions. Yes, I know I can do some research, but ultimately they are the experts. So I would want to rely on that expertise. But you're right. We've seen that, especially with COVID, that has exploded that sight unseen purchases. I know a lot of people who bought homes not seeing their home, but I also feel like a lot of people regret those sort of things, whether that's purchasing that car, purchasing that home without actually physically driving it, testing it out, viewing it. So I hope that that's not the case for these medications that are being prescribed right now, in honestly in these last 5 to 10 years.
And do you think there's a world that exists where you can still get the professional opinion and still utilize telehealth? For instance, if I came in to see you and I said, I want on a GLP-1 or I want on hair loss or whatever it is that I'm focused on, I can go through Hims and Hers to get this. It'll be cheaper. This is what they'll give me. Can you give me an opinion about that? Is that an open discussion with most medical care providers?
I would say so. I think if you have a good physician or a good doctor that is managing your care, we are not gatekeepers. We're not trying to keep everything for the pharmaceuticals. In fact, our goal is to try to make everything as accessible for our patients as possible. So I always explain to my patients, hey, you can go through a compound pharmacy. Just know that these are your risks. You can ultimately decide what concerns you, and you decide if you want to get the medications from them or me. However, I still want to know if there's any issues going on, especially if you're having side effects that are not being addressed. And anytime that you have an escalation in your medication, please let me know, because those are things that I want to keep in your chart in case something happens so that we can support you moving forward beyond that.
That's awesome. In that aspect, patients can get the best of both worlds, to where we've always talked about being honest with your doctor. If they're honest with their doctor or their medical care provider, and they explain what they want their end goal and their journey to be, then you guys can really sit down and navigate that together and find those areas of, hey, well, I recommend this because it's a little bit cheaper. Just let me know. Just tell me what you're doing. And that way I can help you check and adjust as you go. That's actually probably the best approach. If I'm being honest, like, that's an approach I feel comfortable taking.
Yeah. And again, referencing back to our episode where we talked about finding that good physician and good lawyer, reference that. Find a good physician, and that way you can have these sort of open conversations and not feel afraid to voice your opinion or your concerns, because the doctor is there to help give advice. We're not there to be your parent to tell you exactly what to do. I have a lot of patients who I recommend things and they choose to do half of it or none of it. Ultimately, it's their life. They choose whatever risks they want to take. And as long as they understand that the decision that they're making will result in effects that they have made. So that's all. It's an open dialogue, open communication. I also do not want to be shocked by something that comes up later. You get hospitalized and we find out that you've actually been on a medication you shouldn't have been on, and it caused this whole cascade of issues. Like, I'd rather know that ahead of time so that we can prepare, but also so that we're not digging and searching for the answer when it was there all along.
There you go. Don't lie to your doctor. Tell your doctor everything. They're there to support, and they're there to help you along your journey. So with that, this has been the episode of the Medical Legal Brief, where medicine meets the law. I'm Lawyer Nik with Dr. Long. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, follow. We're on all the socials. New episodes airing Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central Time. We hope to see you in the comments. Thanks for listening.
Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.